Here. Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Yuri Adams. I am the Economic Development Director for the City of Williamsburg, and we are delighted to be here to host the August Lunch and Learn for the Home-Based Business Network. I am going to try to move my slide over. Is it going to work? Yes, it will. Okay. So thank you to our 7 locality hosts all across the peninsula. We appreciate your support in putting this series on. Just a couple of notes before I dive into the introduction so that all of the attendees know we cannot see you, we cannot hear you, so please feel free to go ahead and eat your lunches. And this is being recorded, so it'll be posted later. And then the other note is just go ahead and drop any questions you have in the chat box or in the Q&A. Rachel and I will both be monitoring that as we move forward. So it is my pleasure to be here today to introduce Rachel Frazier. She is the Senior Business Counselor at the Innovation Commercialization Assistance Program at George Mason University. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rachel, and she'll go a little bit more into her background and why she's here today. But she is an awesome lady. We're so lucky to have her here. She's got a ton of experience working with businesses, mentoring them, counseling them, and helping them grow and thrive. So Rachel, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Yuri. It's great to be here. So I'm going to get started. I see some folks in the actual audience that I know, so I just want to give a shout out. Hey, Mike Desher, have to do that. He was one of the 3 amigos at William and Mary. So hey, Mike. Hopefully one day we'll catch up. But basically, like Yuri said, my name's Rachel, and I met Yuri and Matt because I transferred over the business incubator to William and Mary and really established a presence on campus during the pandemic. And I've been working with growing companies since 2007 and have mentored pretty much every kind of company you could imagine, everything from a small business that was providing golf cart transport to and from the stadium of one of the best college football teams in the nation, to an advanced chemical company, so a high-tech company who was trying to commercialize a new catalyst. And what I really want to do today, and the reason why I'm here, and the reason why I think Yuri and Matt asked me to join, is because I really want to talk about, really share, and hopefully help y'all with something that I've seen almost every entrepreneur that I've worked with struggle with. And it's the idea of making sure that you're capturing your value, right? Determining your worth and how to structure pricing to capture that value. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover some basics, and then we're actually going to spend some time working through what y'all are doing. So you're going to spend some time working through what you're doing. And then if we have time, we can do a case study. But really the whole point of me being here is to basically air everything out with your companies and figure out, are you actually determining your worth? And are you using a pricing tactic to capture the full value of your worth? Okay, so there are mistakes that every entrepreneur makes, from the first-time entrepreneur to the experienced entrepreneur. And one of the common pricing mistakes is pricing on cost. All right, so we know how much it costs to make our product, right? We can add a markup that's a profit, and therefore we have a price. How hard can that be? Well, typically it's not a good strategy, and it's not a strategy to price. If you think about it, are you leaving lots of money on the table? So we'll kind of see why that could be a huge problem. All right. Now, the next mistake is pricing lower than the competition, right? So if they're charging $500, the best way for me to enter the market is to charge $488, because I'm thinking no one would ever pay more than the existing products. Well, we'll also see why this is another wayward strategy. All right, so the very first thing that we've got to kind of talk about is that pricing is determined by revenue streams, but pricing is not the same as revenue streams. And this one may seem obvious, but you have to think about it in the context of what your business model is, right? The revenue stream is basically your strategy, the strategy that you use to generate cash from each of your customer segments. It's the way that you actually earn money. It's the way that you get money. So what you want to think about here is a subscription model versus direct sales, for example, okay? On the flip side, pricing are the tactics that you use to set the price, all right? And you may have different tactics within a revenue stream, okay? And so how do you think about pricing? How is it that you actually set tactics? There are basically two main models of pricing tactics, all right? One is fixed prices, all right? And it's just like it sounds, okay? Here's how it is. It's the fixed price. Well, how is it that you set a fixed price? Well, we're going to take the cost of what it takes to build our product, and then we'll add in an amount wherever it is that we think profit should be. And that's a very simple way. It's cost plus markup. This gets you to the minimum price in the market. Gets you to basically the lowest value that you could be, all right? But what if you know something that your competitors don't know, all right? Because you've been out talking to customers for weeks, for months, for years, all right? And you know that they value your feature over the competition. In fact, you know exactly how much they value what it is that you have to offer, all right? So instead of pricing based on cost, we can price on specific customer segments or on the features that we know that they need. And this is value-based pricing. Already sounding a little better, right? Hopefully. Okay, and there's a third type of fixed pricing, and it's volume pricing. Okay, and so maybe we want to encourage high volume because we have economies of scale, right? Because we can afford to do this. In fact, it's actually better for our model to have larger numbers, larger quantities of orders, right? So maybe we want to fix the price, okay, for quantities of 1 to 10 at $100, all right? But if you buy in quantities of 10 to 100, it drops down to $90. And so we can think about stepping the discount, right, until we actually incentivize volume. And here's the key, we incentivize volume by even going down to $9.90 for 100,000 plus. And this way you can see that this 100% incentivizes volume and is a really good model for certain types of businesses, okay? So cost plus markup, value-based, volume-based are all examples of fixed pricing tactics. All right, now there is another type of pricing, and that's dynamic pricing. And it's just as it sounds. Dynamic means that it moves. All right, how on earth can we have prices that move, right? We usually think that once the price is written down, it doesn't change unless we scratch through it and write another price, right? So what is it that we mean when we say that pricing moves? Okay, well, if you think about it, any pricing that you negotiate, all right, anything that you actually haggle, right? You go back and forth. Okay, you start with, we have this price on paper, but that's just the starting point of the conversation. Negotiating prices are dynamic. Airlines are another great example of dynamic pricing, right? I mean, dynamic pricing, and it's called yield management. Okay, and so if you think about it, once a plane takes off, an airline can't get any money from a seat. If a seat's not filled, they don't sell the seat and they can't make money. So what do? Well, let's say a month before, the ticket is $500 a seat. All right. And then let's say a week before, it actually changes to $600 a seat. All right. To catch those people who are desperate, last minute needs to get on an airplane, right? Bump up the price. Okay. All right. But then 1 hour before, and this is the kicker, this is why this is so dynamic and why this is so impactful. Let's say an hour before, they actually drop the price down to $99, right? Because what do they know? Once the plane takes off, they can't sell that seat. So yield management, which is based on experience, based on time, et cetera, is actually really, really interesting. It's an interesting pricing model, okay? And companies that have perishable seats or time, for example, are really good at doing this kind of model. Another kind of dynamic pricing is a real-time market. Okay, and so a stock market is an example of real-time market. This isn't one that we see very frequently. And yet another type of dynamic pricing are auctions. Okay, and so eBay is an example of auction pricing, which is dynamic pricing. All right, so we kind of covered a lot basically in setting up the different kinds of pricing models. Hopefully it's inspiring you to think about something that is relevant to what your company is doing and what you're trying to achieve, right? Okay, and if we just recap real quick, there are two types of pricing models. They're fixed and dynamic, okay? And really what I hope everybody in the room is asking, and what I hope everybody in the room is thinking is, how do I know which one to use? All right. You've been talking to customers. Hopefully you know some things from your customers. What you need to constantly be thinking about is what's the right revenue stream, okay, for the right customer segment. Get that match, okay? And then within that, what's the right tactic? Is it fixed or is it dynamic? And which one are you going to pick? Okay, here's some questions to consider. All right. And so how many of you are thinking about these? How many of you have thought about these? Real quick, jot down the ones that jump out at you. Okay, the ones where you think that you can make a real improvement. How do your customers currently buy? What are your revenue streams? How are your revenue streams associated with pricing tactics? How much do your customers value your product or your service over competitors? And how important is encouraging high volume to your business model? And we'll pause here for any questions or comments, and please add them to the chat or add them in the Q&A. And I'm not seeing any, so please don't be shy. And I know everybody's eating lunch. So first, Rachel tells us what we're doing wrong, and then she kind of gives us this general information, which kind of seems obvious. We already kind of know what we're doing. And now she's asking us to stop eating and write questions in the chat. But seriously, if you have any questions, go ahead and add them to the chat. All right, because what we're going to do next, and hopefully this is the highly valuable part to each and everybody in the room, is that we're going to take a look and we're going to spend some time working through what you're doing. Okay. And so what we're going to try and do is get you to a point where you can understand your model. Okay. By visualizing it. All right. And we're going to pull in these things that, we just talked about, including revenue streams, right? What revenue stream is it that you're using now, right? What customer segments do you have? And then identify what's the pricing model, okay? And I'm going to give you a heads up, okay? I'm going to give you a little bit of insight, is that we're doing this because it's going to help you identify where you're perhaps leaving money on the table and where perhaps you can make some improvements to your pricing model and actually establish a more viable, sustainable business. Okay, and I see a question in the chat. Mike has a question, he put it in, or in the Q&A. In the first model, how do you keep from selling below cost as you drop prices for volume purchases? Now, Mike, that's actually a really, really good question. And I want to hit on, I'm going to do a little bit of interpretation of the question, and then I'm going to hit on something that's crucial. Because I really did stay at the atmospheric level with this, right? Like we didn't dive down into any of these models. So in the first model, if you're thinking of fixed prices, which means that prices are not negotiable. Okay. The question is, how do you keep from selling below cost? So how do you actually keep your price that your customer pays above the cost that it takes you to build it as you drop prices for volume purchases? And that's critical. And it's actually why you don't want to use cost plus unless you're doing something very specific that requires cost plus. You really want to stay away from it. Why? Because of exactly what Mike's saying. Mike's saying that, you know, as you go more and more, as you start to grow, you think about, you know, Amazon sells everything for as cheap as possible. Well, how the heck do you compete with that? You can't. Okay. And so what you have to do is identify, instead of actually taking the cost that it takes you to build it and adding some, so you think about it, I try to do it with my hands a little bit. Okay. But if you think about it, you have the amount of money that you spend, and let's say you spend 99 cents to make your product, right? Or perform your service. Okay. And then you add on top of that a markup, right? You add a markup. And let's say you say, well, I make it for 99 cents. I'll sell it for $1.24. Arbitrary number. It's where you think your profit should be. You haven't thought about like the amount of costs that come up, not in month 1, not in month 12, not in month 36, but the ones that recur over time and that actually actually increase over time. And so if you have to go down in price in the market at all, look what happens. It still costs you the same amount. In fact, with inflation, it's going to start increasing. Your costs are going to go up. That's what you should probably bank on, right? But if you have to lower your price any because of market fluctuation, you have little wiggle room, okay? And so cost plus is one of the places where you really don't want to be. And a lot of times we call it a going out of business strategy, which sounds harsh, but hey, that's what we're here to talk about, right? We're here to talk about the things that nobody else wants to talk about. We're here to air these things out. And so, Mike, to answer your question, in the first model, how do you keep from selling below cost as you drop the prices for volume purchases? Well, I mean, I'm not sure you do, right? Okay. If you think about volume-based pricing, really what you're doing is you're capturing you're basically putting all of your margin on the side where people are paying the most for the smallest number of quantities. And there are only certain types of revenue streams that can really take advantage of a volume-based pricing model. All right. And if we have time, we'll get to a very good example of that one. Okay. So hopefully that answered your question, Mike. If you, that's right. You never make it up in volume. Fantastic. Exactly. Right. Yes. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. And then I see another question from Pam. So trying to push customers to a website, but they're older and resisting. How do you overcome this challenge? Wow. That could be an entire topic for this Lunch and Learn series, right? Because that's one of the most difficult things to do, right? And so, so this is like really, this is a question that again will go back to the model, okay, and go back to your business model, okay. And so there are a couple of tactics that you could do, which we can talk about, Pam. But this idea of pushing customers to a website, the very first thing you have to understand, and hopefully you're talking to people and understanding where they go to look for information. And wherever it is that they're telling you that they go right now to look for information, if it's the WI Daily, then you put an ad in that, all right, that links to your website. And a tactic that you could use to drive people to actually click on it, because there's a big difference. And I get the feeling that you know that you've experienced this already. There's a big difference with me being able to just say, yeah, so Rachel said, yeah, easy, go put an ad in the newspaper and then they'll link out to your website. Well, no, that's really not easy at all. But you can incentivize it, right? That's why you see all of those magazines, you know, all those magazines, direct flyers with the coupons that we get in the mail. That's why you see all of those, right? Because that coupon is incentivizing you to take the next step. So in your case, Pam, this idea of trying to push the customers to the website, but they're older and they're resisting, well, to overcome it, you have to incentivize it in some way. So it literally could be a discount on your service. Now, if we think about what kind of model that is, Pam, I want you to put it in the Q&A if you're up for it. What kind, based on those pricing models that we just went through, so the fixed ones were cost plus markup, value-based, and volume-based, which one do you think that would fit most into? So the idea is that you're trying to get as much traffic to your website as possible. And to incentivize that large volume, you'd provide a discount. And anybody can add it. All right, that would be an example of doing a volume-based pricing, right? So that if you have, or if you do a service, and so Pam, I don't really know what your business is, you know, happy to talk with you one-on-one, my email, you'll get my email after this. But if you're trying to get more and more people to actually go, to actually sign up for your service, to actually get to a point where they're using your service, if they sign up for 25, which they can only do by going to your website, right? So there's a tactic to drive them to your website, then they get 25% off. And this works for some companies. In fact, it works for Gym Guys, all right, which is a Williamsburg-based business, okay? And so the idea is that you're basically incentivizing them to do more and taking the next step. So do you see the link? So you take the next step by going out to your website. Let me know if that answered it. Let me know if you have a follow-on question, and please continue to ask questions, all right? And hopefully Pam, that kind of got to it. But there are definitely tactics that you can use. I strongly encourage everybody to go work with a SCORE mentor. In fact, what we're going to do next is we're going to spend some time working through yours. And so without further ado, grab a pen, grab some paper. If you're up for doing it on an electronic device, go for it. All right. But we're going to draw this out. And so I strongly encourage you to bring with you what we're about to draw out to your SCORE mentor, all right, to any of the business mentors that are available in the Williamsburg region, okay? And so hopefully you've got your pen and paper ready. Hopefully you're starting to think about some of these things, okay? The very first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna draw a box with your company name in it. I know, sounds so obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I've done this workshop and 9 out of 10 people don't start with their company. Right? And so we're going to start with your company. We're going to start with your company right in the middle. Okay. It's the heart of what we're trying to do. Okay. All right. And Jean, I see your question in the chat. Okay. And so I think I'll answer it as we get to this next one that's going to take a little bit more time. Okay. So the next thing you're going to do is literally you're going to draw boxes for the different groups of customers that you currently have, that you have right now, okay? And so what I mean by different groups of customers, well, basically you're gonna categorize them around what they value. So if they have different values, okay, or if they're receiving different services or receiving different product features, then you're gonna group them and draw a box around them. And if you need an intermediary step, you can go ahead and list them out. You can list out everybody, right, that you currently have as a customer. And Jean, I'm going to bump your question back, I think, to maybe a couple of slides forward, because we'll actually use your question as an example to work through one of the next steps. All right, so let's say you've got a handful of customers written out in boxes now, okay? And those are the ones that you currently have. Draw out, if you're thinking about starting a company, if you're thinking about expanding a customer base, if you're thinking about making a new product to reach different people, go ahead and draw the customers that you want to have in boxes. Thanks, Jean. I appreciate the Q&A response. And remember, what we're trying to do is draw this out so that you can spot the areas where you can improve pricing for your model, okay? And hopefully ensure that you don't go out of business, right? Identify a pricing tactic that's going to ensure that you don't go out of business. Barring any more pandemics, barring any natural disaster, barring any of those things, right? Because we all know after the past few years how difficult external factors can become. Okay, so now you probably have maybe 3, maybe up to 7. Some of the people who are really excited about doing this have 10 to 12. All right, okay. But you got your customers. All right, next, what you're going to do is you're going to visualize the revenue by literally drawing arrows between your company, right? Your company in the middle, and your customer segments. Okay. And you're going to describe the ways that you generate cash. Okay. What you want to think about are payments, subscriptions, leases, contracts. What are the different exchanges of cash? And keep in mind, for some companies, you may even have to draw arrows from a customer segment to another customer segment. So between customer segments. It depends on basically the industry that you're in and your business model. And if it helps, for every arrow of exchange of cash, you can put an arrow going in the opposite direction and identify what is exchanged for that cash. So Jean, in your example, and Jean says in the Q&A, I do a lot of programs. How do you price time? How do you price travel? Okay. And so time spent is a pretty important part of that piece of it, because somebody's giving you money and you're spending time actually delivering value to them. Okay, so if it helps, draw an arrow in the opposite direction of your revenue streams that shows what you provide in exchange for that cash. Okay. All right, and finally, you should be looking at basically what happens between your company and your customers, what they expect to give you and what they expect to receive in return, right? Okay, so now what you're going to want to do is you want to identify the pricing tactics for each of those revenue streams, all right? And what you want to, the way you want to do it is you want to write it out next to the arrow for the revenue streams, and then you want to list it out to the side. Okay. Take a moment to do that. So have you taken the cost plus a markup, right? So you could imagine for Jean's example of delivering programs, this sounds a lot like a service. And so everything that we've discussed so far, I realize that I've been using the word product, but it literally is applicable to service-based companies, okay? Companies who provide services. All right, so that idea of a program sounds like a service, okay? And so Jean, you know, I'm sure that you're delivering some value to the people. And you could think about, one could think about with a service, writing out how much it costs you to perform the service, okay? And including time and including travel, and setting a fixed price based on where you think your profit should be, right? But I think the real question that Jean is asking, how do you price time, also travel? Because time can change, right? Travel can change, which means what? That your costs can change. And so if you do cost plus markup, what's going to happen is that when your costs change, your price cannot necessarily change in the market. If you set a fixed price, then you can't go back to the customer and say, oh, well, I thought I was going to spend $550 on a plane ticket, but there were some last minute changes and I had to spend $650 on a plane ticket. So I'm going to need you to pay me for that difference. What are they going to say? Nope. We've already got our contract in place and it's a set price. It's a fixed price. So you could think about doing a slightly, choosing from one of the other models instead of cost plus markup, which is what we just described. And the revenue stream in that case is a contract, right? It's a contract service, okay? Instead of doing cost plus markup, what you could consider doing, Jean, is identifying the value that you offer to them, okay? Are you saving them time? Are you saving them money? Is the experience itself worth something and worth more than you would charge for basically the cost that you incur to deliver the programs? And if it is, then what you could do is you could set the price based on what your customer values. And the only way to do that is you have to identify, you have to quantify what your customer, you have to identify what your customer thinks is the amount of time saved, the amount of money saved, the amount of education that you provide, whatever your service is, okay? So now take a look what you have written out. So you should have basically your company, you should have customers and boxes, you should have basically your revenue streams. In this case, it's a contract service, right? So contract service that way. And then you should also, you know, kind of identify what it is you deliver in exchange for that money. And you should have some kind of pricing tactic listed out. Are you doing cost plus markup? Are you doing value-based? Are you doing volume-based? Okay. And so now just take a look and they should all be listed out, right? So you should have a visual diagram and you should have a list. Now, take a look at the pricing models that you have listed out. How well do they match what your customers value? All right. And so now take a couple of minutes to circle, star, do something to mark, to identify where you think there's an opportunity for real improvement in your pricing. So wherever you see cost plus markup, unless you're forced into it because of the industry that you're in, and that's very rare, okay? Especially for a small business. Small businesses are a lot more flexible and adaptable, okay, than large corporations. So everybody in this room is probably going to be agile enough to improve your pricing model. So wherever you have cost plus markup, would value-based fit any better? Are you leaving money on the table? Is there some amount in the price? Is there some room to go up in price where customers are still going to buy what it is that you have? Do you have a unique feature that nobody else has, right? Do you offer something in addition to what the competition does? It's another way to think about it. Is there an opportunity to adjust, make a slight adjustment in your pricing model, flip it to value-based pricing, which honestly can change over time, right? Okay. And as your cost goes up, it sure can change because everybody experiences inflation, and your customers are also going to be experiencing it, and they'll be maybe amenable to increasing the price. Okay. But where are you leaving money on the table? That's what you want to do. For any that are value-based, are there areas, if you take a look at your diagram, are there areas where really instead of making it cost plus markup or even value-based, maybe you really need to switch to a volume-based model, where what you need to do is you need to, because it takes a heck of a lot more time to do one than it does to do 100,000. And what I mean by that is that it takes the same amount of time to do one that it does to do 10. Maybe what you want to do is you want to incentivize people buying 10 because you're capturing more of the value, right? And more of what it takes for you to make one, so that you charge more, you price one higher than you price 10. Does that make sense? I tried to say it in a little bit of a different way. All right. But identify those areas. Okay. And perhaps some of you are sitting on basically the ability to negotiate. And Jean, I imagine that you are sitting on something that could be negotiated. Okay. In which case you could have inside of your contract this idea of travel. This contract covers travel up to $500. In the event that travel exceeds $500, the customer agrees to pay for excess travel. And see, that's negotiated. And then you get it in your contract. Okay. And so now you have a dynamic model. Okay. So if something happens, if something changes, you're not stuck meeting the requirements of the contract on your end, but spending more to do that. Right. Okay. So it's all about capturing value. Oh, Yuri, I see that maybe you had a little bit of a question. Does that make sense? Okay. Oh, good. Gee, thank you for putting that in the Q&A. Okay, fantastic. So I feel like that kind of at least like answered part, maybe at the atmospheric level, again, part of your question. But I guarantee that each and every person in this room is going to be able to identify areas of improvement. And with this diagram and with what you have listed out and with the areas of improvement, I also know based on the SCORE mentors that are in your area, they're going to be able to help, right? Help you talk these things through, help you test these in the market. Okay. And so your next step would be to actually test it in the market, right? So if you think that you are leaving money on the table and you really want to understand if that's the case or not, the only way to do it is to go out and try it with customers. Okay. First, you want to talk to them, get an understanding, make sure that you're not totally off base, right? Make sure you don't surprise your existing customers. Okay. And the kind of surprise that nobody wants, right? We always want to pleasantly surprise them. But you want to test it. Okay. And really that is the only way that you can determine what you're worth, right? The market has to tell you that. Okay. And so talking through this and going through a test will help. And so if we go back to the question about, well, I'm trying to get people to move to the website. Let's say you try a volume-based model. Okay. And I'm not exactly sure what the business is. It might be helpful if you put it back in the chat, trying to push people to the website, right? Maybe you incentivize them, right? By giving them a discount if they go to the website, if they sign up on the website. And that's an example of a market test. All right. So that's how you would go out and you would test any changes that you make. I want to pause again. Okay. And I want to make sure that, that all that made sense. I know we went through a lot. Hopefully you got something out of it, right? And please feel free. I'm going to pause for just a moment and feel free to ask any questions. All right. If you think of any others, just put them in the Q&A. Okay. So Rachel, what if I can't draw this out? What if I can't explain this clearly? Then that means that you've got to go out and you've got to talk to tens, hundreds of your potential customers. And really what you have to be doing is asking, how can we make money here? Because if you can't draw it out, then it'll be very difficult to articulate it to your customers, which then will be very difficult to get customers to actually buy what it is you're trying to sell or provide to them. Okay. And so one last note about this, we talked about different pricing models. We talked about some of the ways in which you can actually identify the best pricing model for you. We kind of walked through what it is that you're doing currently. Your pricing model will and should change over time. This is really important because every now and then you got to go out and you've got to do a gut check. Okay. And so you've got to ask yourself, right? Is this price based on an insight that we gain from our customer? Or is it based on convenience? Or is it easier for you as the entrepreneur? And if it's based on convenience, if it's easier for you as an entrepreneur, then chances are you're headed in a direction that's not capturing the full value of what you're worth. And chances are you're headed into a direction that you're going to stay red, right? You're going to be spending more than you're making. Okay. Another thing, be sure, because this changes over time, be sure, all right, that how much your customer is willing to pay for your solution, right? Are you saving them time? Are you saving them money? Are you providing them something that they absolutely love? How valuable is it to them? Is it more than your cost plus price? Because pricing based solely on your internal economics may be leaving money on the table. And again, means that you're not capturing the full value. All right. Another thing to think about is how unique is your company? How unique is your product, is your service, right? And ensure that you're providing the most value and not just the cheapest service or price. So remember, pricing is your worth in the market. All right. It's got to match what customers value, or you could be leaving money on the table. I kept saying that over and over. If you can't tell, that's like something I'm really, really passionate about. I love helping entrepreneurs not leave money on the table. Okay. And so it also, your pricing tactics should match your revenue streams, but most importantly, it works to ensure that you don't go out of business. All right. And I'm still going to take some questions and answers, but in the off chance that you are kind of intrigued by some of the aspects that we talked about, and remember, we really just hit on the very high level things, right? If you're thinking about starting a new company, if you're thinking about launching a new product, and you're wanting to basically flip your mindset, especially from the cost plus markup mindset into something that is a little bit different and something that actually determines the most efficient business model, right? It identifies the highest value revenue model that you could have. If you're interested in any of these things, then please take a look at the Innovation Commercialization Assistance Program. Please go become a member of Launchpad, the regional incubator. Go talk to your SCORE mentors there are many programs that are available to you as entrepreneurs. And this program in particular is a free service to any business that is in the state of Virginia. And it really works to flip the mindset. And I know Mike Desher, who is one of the Launchpad mentors, Launchpad coaches, also has this new flipped mindset, and flip it to the customer. And so SCORE and Launchpad are great resources. Again, I'll answer any questions, but I think that that's about all we have time for today. And thank you, Matt. Thank you, Yuri, for this wonderful opportunity. I wish that I could meet all of everybody in the room in person, but I had my email address on the first slide. I'll be sure that y'all have it, so you can reach out to me with any questions, because I love talking to people and I love helping entrepreneurs. And that's it. Thank you all for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was awesome. And I think I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the chat. Everybody saying that they learned a lot. So I love seeing that. I am going to pop up this guy here. I hope everyone can see my slides now. So save the date for the September Lunch and Learn. Annalise Gear is going to be talking about from solopreneur to small business, how to take the first steps to grow your workforce. So go on ahead and register for that at peninsulahbb.com.